guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I'm telling you guys about my top fantasy romance books of all time. So these are my ultimate favourite fantasy romance books, and previously I've always done kind of fantasy romance recommendations where I recommend you the latest fantasy romance books that I've read. However, I've never really done kind of a ultimate, these are my complete favourites, and I really wanted to do an updated version so that I could tell you guys and hopefully you can get some recommendations from this video. So fantasy romance is my ultimate cozy comfort genre. I am obsessed with romance and I'm obsessed with fantasy, so it's like a perfect culmination. And I really think fantasy romance right now is just doing some great things. Like, there are so many great books coming out that mixes fantasy and romance really well and are kind of equal in both parts of the genres. So without further ado, let's get cracking on the books. So I want to say that these are not in any particular order, but they're kind of like in a loose order, because the first book I really want to talk to you about is without a doubt my favourite fantasy romance book that I have read recently, and it is The Inadequate Heir by Danielle L. Jensen. So over the past year or two I read the Bridge Kingdom series. Now those books as well are probably top of this list, I would say. The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen are the kind of main books in this world, and recently Danielle L. Jensen released The Inadequate Heir, which is the third book in the series. It's kind of like a spin-off from The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen. So the kind of general gist about these books is that there are nations at war, and it follows a main character from the Bridge Kingdom who is a woman called Lara. She is a princess and she is trained to bring down the enemy nation, and she'll do this by getting married to the prince or the king of the enemy nation called Aaron. And her goal, her one thing that she has been trained to do, is to infiltrate his kingdom and find a way to bring him down and help her father take over his country. So it's very kind of political, very heavy on the more fantasy elements, like the kind of, you know, fantasy world. And there's not really magic in this book, I must say as well. It's kind of like more strict, kind of old school epic fantasy. But what I absolutely adore about this book, and I will go on to why I enjoyed The Inadequate Heir, the third book in particular, the most, is that it's just so vast and expansive. Like, you really get a sense of all these different kingdoms warring with each other, who the allies are, who the enemies are, and at the heart of all this are just some excellent romances. So as I said, the first two books in the series are kind of like a complete series, I guess, and follow Aaron and Lara. And they are obviously a kind of love interest, and they have a very enemies to lovers type of romance. And then we have The Inadequate Heir, which takes place at the same time as the second book in the series, The Traitor Queen. And The Inadequate Heir focuses on one of Lara's brothers. And basically he is a kind of commander. He's kind of heading up a command post somewhere in his kingdom, and there he stumbles across a general of an enemy nation, and he falls in love with her and she falls in love with him. But it is really tricky because this is like enemies to lovers at its finest. What I absolutely adore about The Inadequate Heir is it is dark. Like, it is quite dark. There are a lot of kind of very extreme things that happen in this book. There is, you know, a lot of kind of gory fighting scenes, a lot of kind of torture, imprisonment. There's all sorts that goes on. But there's also an amazing romance at the heart between these two characters who are sworn enemies. Now, I recently read The Inadequate Heir and I was so blown away. I think this is the best book in the series, and that's saying something because the first two books are already incredible. But The Inadequate Heir, like, just didn't miss at any point. Like, it was perfect, and the ending has me shook. I need the next book ASAP. Danielle L. Jensen, please give it to me. But I urge you all to read the series. I think Booktube is sleeping on it. It really is, because this is not like any other fantasy romance series I have read before. It's really accomplished, really well written, it's really well plotted, and the romance, guys, is phenomenal. So please, if you take one thing away from this video, please read the Bridge Kingdom series, especially for The Inadequate Heir, because I need people to talk to me about it with, okay? I need my fellow Danielle L. Jensen fans out there to get in touch. So that's what I'm gonna say about that series. definitely my favorite at the moment. Now, another fantasy romance series that I absolutely love is the Married to Magic series by Elise Cover. It starts off with A Deal with the Fae King, and then it goes on to A Dance with the Fae Prince. Now, I read both of these books, and the second book came out really recently. I absolutely loved both of them. They're really, really fun, and I think they're not as like adult, I would say, as, you know, Danielle L. Jensen's books. These are a slightly more traditional fantasy romance, so it features fae, it features elves. The next book in the series is called A Duel with the Vampire Lord, I think, or something like that. I am so excited about that book. I think it actually has come out recently, so I'm gonna pick that up ASAP. But there's something really magical about all of the books in this series, and I was really impressed with the first book, which is A Deal with the Elf King. And this is about a character who basically has to be married to the Elf King in order to keep that Elf Kingdom alive. Like, they need to marry a human in order to keep their land flourishing, and there's kind of a curse along with that and everything. So I really would recommend that series. The most recent book I read, obviously, was the second book in the series, which was A Dance with the Fae Prince, and that was really impressive in terms of scope. Like, it seemed at first a very kind of, I don't know, quite simplistic novel, but then towards the end it really expands and shows you a lot more of this world. So I really would recommend these books if you're looking for something quite fun, very romantic, and just like magical and peak fantasy romance. So I love these books. The next book I really want to talk to you about is a series, is the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Maharin. And this features a witch and a witch hunter who have to get married, and they fall in love. So I read the first book, Serpent and Dove, a few years ago now, and absolutely fell in love with it. Like, when I tell you I was hooked, like, I have no words by how amazing this book is. So this book is set in kind of a fictional France, and it's set in kind of like a medieval type setting, like kind of an oldie timey setting. And it features our main character Lou, who is a witch. And she's just no standard witch, she is the heir to a witch queen, I guess, like a kind of sorceress who leads up her kind of type of coven, I guess. But anyway, she is on the run, and she is hiding from her mother, who is a very dangerous woman indeed. And there she kind of stumbles across a witch hunter who is part of this like religious order that hunt witches, and she basically meets him and they are forced to marry. And she has to keep her identity as a witch secret from him, otherwise, you know, he's gonna kill her. So I love the kind of setup of this book, and let me just say the romance in this is brilliant. What I also really appreciate about this series is it is hilarious. Like, Lou as a character is so funny, and paired with her husband and love interest, Reed, who is very dry, very kind of virtuous, and very like, you know, he is religious and was trained to kind of hate witches. So he's very kind of straight-laced and doesn't do anything that he deems as sin-worthy. So they just make a great pairing. They're kind of like opposites, and I just really love this series. I'm still to read the third book, Gods and Monsters, but I'm going to be reading that in the next few months, and I'll let you know my thoughts. Okay, the next fantasy romance series, to be fair, should have been at the top of my pile, but I've recently read The Inadequate Heir and just like really wanted to rave about that book. I feel like I talk about this series so much on my channel, you're probably all bored, but I am obsessed with this series and I will shout about it from the rooftops forever. So it is, of course, the Kingdom of the Wicked series. So it starts with Kingdom of the Wicked, which is this beautiful book. This is a proof copy that was sent to me from Hodder, so thank you to you guys for sending me this a good few years ago now. But basically this book started an obsession of mine, and I am like still in the throes of that obsession. So it follows main character Amelia, whose twin sister Vittoria gets brutally murdered. Now Amelia and Vittoria are witches, and they live in Italy, and it's a beautiful Italian setting, and it's kind of like historic Italy as well. So incredible setting for a fantasy romance book. So Amelia and Vittoria are told from a young age by their aunt, who is also a witch, basically stay away from the 7 princes of hell. They mean trouble. They are very evil and mean harm to witches. And of course, when Vittoria gets murdered, Amelia needs to find out who has killed her sister, and she needs help and she finds it in one of the 7 princes of hell, Wrath. So that's kind of the gist of this book. Who committed the murder of her sister? Then we go into this book, Kingdom of the Cursed, where we get the most incredible budding romance, and this is a lot more kind of like spicier. So this actually is an adult book, where I think Kingdom of the Wicked was written as like more YA. The age range has been pushed up a little bit to allow for some spicier scenes, because this is one of my favorite fantasy romance books ever. This book just incredible, no words, obsessed. So this sees us go to hell, and Amelia has to work with Wrath to basically deliver on a promise that she makes at the end of book 1. And let's just say the twists and turns in this book and the romantic and sexual chemistry, I cannot. I am obsessed. I love these characters so much. And the 3rd book in the series, Kingdom of the Feared, is coming out this month as I'm filming this video, and I'm not okay, because I need that book more than I need air. So yeah, I'm very, very excited, as you can tell. Now, the next book is something that you'll probably have all heard of, but it's definitely one of my all-time favourite fantasy romance books, and it is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So at first glance, you're probably like, fantasy romance, like The Night Circus? Probably not as you know fantasy romance, but I would classify this as fantasy romance, because it is a fantasy book about sorcerers and magicians and this magical circus that kind of disappears and appears somewhere very randomly and has no order to it. But then there's a romance at the heart of this plot, which is so beautiful and so kind of bittersweet, I want to say. And when I read this book for the first time, I read it very late in the game. I only read this like last year, and yeah, I'm so late to the party on it, but it was as beautiful, as breathtaking, as perfect as everyone was saying. The fact that it blends that kind of like romance plot at the heart of this, like at the heart of this, it is a love story. Weaves it all together with excellent fantasy, excellent magic, you know, these beautiful descriptions of the circus and magic itself, and kind of this competition of magicians that's at the heart of it. It's just perfect. And if you haven't read The Night Circus, honestly, just go in there expecting nothing and drown out the hype and just focus on the beauty of the book itself, because you will not be disappointed. And this is one of my ultimate favorites for sure. Now, it wouldn't be a fantasy romance video without one key author, and that author is of course Sarah J Maas. So I'm holding up here A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. So I'm holding these two up because I would say like these 2 books were the most instrumental and important to me, like in my whole history of reading Sarah J Maas. So a lot of you guys probably will know I'm a huge Sarah J Maas fan. I don't want to be like, oh, I read her before she was popular, but I did. Like Throne of Glass, I picked that up when it just came out, and you know, the love affair started from then. So it's a very, very long time that I've been reading Sarah J Maas. I actually interviewed her for my booktube channel, which you can watch below, which is very, very exciting if you haven't seen that yet. And I actually interviewed her around A Court of Thorns and Roses. So this is the start, obviously, of a Beauty and the Beast kind of retelling featuring fae, and this book just started my obsession, I guess, with fantasy romance. I hadn't really read a lot of fantasy romance before this, and this changed my perception of the genre completely. I became obsessed with this series like the rest of the world. But if you don't know anything about this book, it is about a girl called Feyre who is very poor and lives with her family and just trying to survive, basically. And she ends up killing a wolf, and this wolf is no ordinary wolf. It is a fae, and because of the fact that she has killed this fae, she is kept prisoner, I guess, in the Spring Court, which is one of the fairy courts, where she meets a man called Tamlin, who is the kind of head of the Spring Court. Now, this starts a Beauty and the Beast style romance, and let's just say A Court of Mist and Fury ups the ante, as we all know. Now, this introduces a character called Rhysand, who is the kind of leader of the Night Court, the king of the Night Court. And this book in particular I want to shout out to, because This changed the game, didn't it? Like, if you've read the series, you know this book flips everything on its head and is probably, I would say, one of the best books Sarah J Maas has ever written, and I will die defending this book. I adore it so, so much. Now, the next favourite fantasy romance book that is one of my all-time favourites is the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. You probably all know this book and this series, you probably have all read it, but this is my favourites video and I have to mention it because this as well just does something so groundbreaking for the genre, and I feel like it's a lot of people's entryway into fantasy romance. So this is about fairies, which Holly Black does so well. If you've not read the rest of Holly Black's fairy books, I really would recommend it because she knows what she's doing when it comes to fairies. So The Cruel Prince is a bully romance, I guess. It's like a hate to love, and it features a girl called Jude who is a human who's been brought up in the fairylands, and there she meets Prince Cardan, love of my life, and they do not get on at the start, which is very, very fair to say. They have this like love-hate relationship throughout the whole series, really, and this book is just so magical. It doesn't shy away from the kind of the darker areas of like fairy mythology, I guess, and you know, obviously features like a bully relationship at the heart where Cardan is pretty awful to her and she equally does awful things to him. So it's an amazing book series. I really would recommend it. I must say, I do think the series gets like less good as it goes on, but The Cruel Prince to me was like the most incredible book, so I really would recommend it. Now, I also have to mention a very, very special book that I absolutely adore. Little disclaimer, I did work on the book publicity campaign for this book because I work in book publishing as a publicist, and it was my pleasure to work on this book, which is actually a favourite book of mine, so that makes it even more special. It is Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kuzniar. So this is a gothic retelling of the Nutcracker, and it kind of takes place in this magical world called Everwood, and it's set in Georgian England in Nottingham and features Marietta, who wants to be a ballet dancer more than anything in her life. And when she can't do that, when she's been forced to marry someone she really, really hates, she manages to find this escape into a magical world called Everwood, which is utterly magical, like breathtaking, very wintry, very Christmassy. So I'd recommend this as a perfect Christmas read. And there she is basically held captive by a very tyrannical king who makes her kind of dance endlessly and imprisons her, and she's not allowed to leave. There she also meets kind of a brilliant cast of characters who become friends of hers, but also a kind of general and kind of a like soldier who she eventually has this incredible romance with. So I absolutely adored this book because it's very magical fantasy romance, but also has that darker streak running through it where, you know, things seem really beautiful and perfect on the surface, but actually there's a dark undercurrent to the book. The romance as well is absolutely incredible. I absolutely love Marietta's kind of slow burn with this soldier, and I really, really would recommend this book, especially as we're getting into like autumn and winter, to pick this book up because it is beautiful and one of my all-time favorite fantasy romance books. So guys, that is it for this video, and those are my all-time fantasy romance favorites. Do let me know what favorite books of yours are on this list. I would love to chat about them with you, and do let me know if there's any books that I am missing off this list that are on your favorites too. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye.